Everyone, this is Scooby-Dooby-Doo, or Baylor A, as I kind of prefer it to be called. What we're going to do in this video is going to be like super basic. Let's get started from scratch with PHP. And I've already made a video like this. And the difference between all my PHP from scratch videos and this one is this one's really going to be like real PHP from scratch. Because what I want to do in this video is talk about getting started. You know, how to install your web server. I'm not going to touch how to install the web servers. There are plenty of videos on YouTube on how to do that. This video, rather, is going to focus more on what do you do once you have your server. You know, how do I work with phpMyAdmin? How do I understand and learn how to work with all these files and stuff in terms I'm not familiar with. So that's what I'm going to do in this video, and I'm going to leave the next video up to the comments because I don't know exactly what to do because I've been doing this for so many years. I don't remember completely what it's like getting started. So I'll remind you at the end of the video if I probably will forget that. But start writing comments like, oh, I need you to talk about this. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And what I'm going to do is I've already installed my PHP server and stuff. And I use a thing called MAMP because I'm on a Mac. And it's mamp.info, and it's for Macs only, but it installs PHP. Where is it going to tell me? It installs PHP, Apache, MySQL, I think. So this is what you're going to need to use for the most part. It's super simple. Macs come with PHP and Apache pre-installed, but I don't like using that one because it's not a nice little package, and it's difficult to learn how to do it all from scratch. So if you're on a Mac, I recommend using MAMP or MAMP Pro. It's a one-click solution. Literally, you install it and you're done. And I don't have MAMP Pro. There's nothing in here that just really like entices me because I can do it all from on my own. But if you want to have these virtual hosts, I can show you how to do that. It's really simple. So let's go ahead and on PCs, when I had a PC, or when I set up a server, I used XAMPP, and surprisingly, this is already in my thing history. It's by Apache Friends, and it actually has a Mac installation as well. If we find, it's for Linux, Windows, and Mac. I actually use this one for Windows, and you can see that the thing I want to also point out is whatever you choose, there's also WAMP, I think. I don't know if WAMP is still under development. It might be, but I'm not entirely sure. The one thing that you want to make sure you get is the latest of everything. You can see this has Apache. Now this, I don't know if this is necessarily the latest. I think PHP is at 5.3.10 now. But you want to at least have PHP 5.3, and you're going to want to at least have MySQL 5 or later. I don't know what my versions are on MAMP. I don't see the info. Maybe it's our documentation. But I don't want to get into all this. Here it is, somewhere, I'm sure. Well, we won't focus on it. I know I have PHP 5.3 or later on my installation, so you're just going to want to make sure that you have PHP 5.3 or later, and at least MySQL 5. And I don't know anything about Apache, so we won't focus on that one. So once you find these and install it, if you have trouble installing it, I don't know if I can really help you because it's kind of a hard thing. It should be really easy, but if you do have problems, most of the time you're going to get an error, and you can just Google search that error. And it looks like they might have a forum here. This might be the better choice just because it's English is the native language, while XAMPP is not. So once you've got this installed, there are also lots of videos on YouTube I'm aware of. I've never looked at them, but there are. You can go ahead and keep watching this video. So enough with the introduction. Let's actually get started. So I actually have my thing at localhost. And if we go here, you can see index of /. And what this is telling you, this is all Apache and all that stuff, rendering this page. And what you need to know is the way you need to know, if I can find Finder, the way this is going to work And this is a Mac file system. It's not exactly the same on Windows, but what I'm going to try to show you should be identical. You can see I have my local host folder here. And if I just go inside of here, whenever I create a new file, which you can't right click and do that. So let me go, I have this also open in TextMate. So hopefully I'm not just jumping too fast, but TextMate is just an editor. You can use any editor you want. It really doesn't matter. We'll just leave it at that. So localhost, you can see I have this folder here, localhost. If I create a new file inside of here, and let's just do like hello.txt for text. And I'm just going to put some more Ipsum text in here just so we have some text to actually look at. If we go back over and look at this, if I reload, you can see now we have this file system. If we go in Finder, you can see this is our folder structure. We have hello.txt, and you can see it's presenting that same thing to us. It's just listing this directory. So if I create a folder in here, and we call this images or something, just like if you were creating a website, if this is actually going to mirror over it, you can see it ends with a / to indicate this is a folder. The thing to remember is that what makes web development pretty easy is that your web server is just a mirror of a file system. Everything inside of this localhost is at the root. I could come inside of here. I could create a new file. So if I go back in here and let's just create something like index.php. PHP is the language extension. If you don't know it, if we go back over to Chrome, reload the page and go into this images directory, you can see it's rendering out index.php. I can come in here and put out hello people and reload. You can see it's put out hello people. It's just a text. PHP is kind of be considered just a text file, really. It's not, because it can allow you to embed PHP, but you can also just write up regular HTML inside of it. So you can see I was able to just put that out here and it just rendered it. And you can see we're in the images directory. I can actually access this file index.php. I can also go back up to the root and go to hello.txt, and that loads out this file here. So that's what I wanted to show you, is that your server is just a folder structure, and you can do everything you need for the most part right inside of Finder or Windows Explorer, I think is what they call it, but I don't know all the names. So once you understand that, it should be pretty simple as to all you're doing here is just dropping files in here, and you can access those files at whatever you name it, and you just do a / here. So with this done, we can go ahead and take a look at phpMyAdmin. So that's going to be / phpMyAdmin. I think Apache Friends, possibly even WAMP, does the same thing. You might have to look into the documentation on that as to how it allows you to access your phpMyAdmin. I was taking a look at it, and I only know how to do this really easy with Vim, but I can load this file. I think it's at applications, MAMP, config, extra, Apache. What are some files in here? Am I in the right directory? Oh, it'll be Apache. And I'm looking for my HTTP config file. Okay, so this is your HTTP config file. It's essentially just your configuration file for Apache. Okay, and here it is. If you can't access, like I showed you, I can go to phpMyAdmin, just a / on it. It's able to do that from this alias right here. It's just saying on any web server or any local host, if I go to / phpMyAdmin, it's automatically going to load phpMyAdmin here. That's one of the things that makes this really easy. If you try to do it and it failed, just copy this line of code. It's not too much, and it should do it right away. You'll have to change this, of course, but that's all it's doing. Oh, and you're probably going to want to copy this in here too. So maybe I'll try to add that as a code snippet somewhere. Okay, so with all that done, what we can do is we can come back to phpMyAdmin, and you can see here are a list of databases that I have. And a database is just, why is Chrome frozen? Okay, there we go. A database, I don't know how to define a database, sorry, but it's essentially just going to hold tables. And we're going to go into that right now. I'm going to create a table. Do I have a users table? I got to be careful. No. So I'm going to create a users table. The theme I'm going to use here is this one right here, just because I think it'll be easier to look at in a screencast because everything's like ginormous. So we're going to create a new database called users, and if you're, I'm going to say this, hopefully it's not confusing, but try not to use, this won't be the same way you do it, I'm sure, pretty sure, on most shared hosting services. So if you can't create a database right inside of phpMyAdmin, you're going to have to use something else, and I don't know if I'll touch on that in this video, but you'll just have to keep that in mind, that actually using a live server is not the same as using a local server. So we're going to create this table called users, and it's not really going to be users, it's going to be more like people, but we're going to leave it at users. We're going to create this, and you can see that now we have our database users, and no tables are found in the database. So let's go ahead and create a table on here. So we're going to create this users table as people. That's going to be the name, the name of the table. And this people is going to have a number of fields. And I don't know the easiest way to find this other than maybe making a comparison to a CSV file. I have numbers installed. I haven't even prepared for this video, so you have to excuse me if this is bad. I don't want you seeing all that. So let me create a new file thing, blank. This is essentially what it's going to look like. We have a sheet. Well, we can call this our users table, or our database. And our table is going to be our people table that we're writing out right here. So what do we want? Well, this is going to be an ID. This is going to be what defines somebody. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You may have seen that on websites before where you actually go to, I don't even know one off the top of my head, where you just go to something / 1 or 2. So we're going to name, this is our ID. We're going to name this one as their name. So this could be Baylor, I don't know, Smith, that's not last, that's the last name. Marcus, and I don't know, we're going to leave it at 3. So we have 3 names here, and what we're going to do is, these are just our fields, okay? We have one for an ID, one for a name. So we know right away we need 2 fields. So we're going to leave it at that, and we're going to go ahead and go here, and this is just really wild looking. I mean, these aren't even the same size. So we have our first one. This is going to be an ID, and this is going to be an integer field. So integer, or int, I guess. And what this says is the type of this field has to be a number. We can't pass a letter character or a symbol, things like that. And the other thing we have to do is we want to set this as the primary index, and you can only have one primary index on a table, and we want to have this as auto increment. I don't know why they abbreviated it, but they have, and they don't even set it as a title anymore. Or I don't know if they ever did, but there it is, auto increment. Which means, as you can see here, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to automatically do 1, 2, 3, 4 in our table when we create new fields. And here we're going to have our name, and this can be a variable amount of characters. So you need to kind of learn through these. A lot of these are kind of pretty obvious. We have text. Text is going to be like paragraphs. We have long text and tiny text, which are just different links. Vark here, though, is going to actually be a one-liner, and it's usually going to be something like a URL to a website or somebody's name or email address. And I think the max can be for the length of characters like 255. But that sounds short, but you think about 255 characters, that's a lot. I usually set mine around 100. But if you need something longer, like a biography, you're probably going to want to have text on here. So you can see this is going to be an integer, this is going to be a float value like 1.2, different things like that. Character is actually going to be, it has to be 5 characters long. It can't be longer, it can't be shorter. So 100 and varchar will be perfect for somebody's name. So everything here I would just leave the same because I'm not completely familiar with all of it. But we're going to go ahead and save this table. You can see now we have our setup. And I'm just going to go ahead and insert a field into this. So we have somebody's name. We can leave this blank. It's automatically going to go to 1 because it's auto increment. And for somebody's name, what we're going to do is I'm just going to put in Baylor. And let's actually do this one too. Let's just put in somebody else's name, like Marcus. So go, you can see it's inserted 2 rows. You can kind of ignore the SQL for right now, but essentially all it's doing is inserting 2 users. And if we come back over to our browse area, you can see our table, ID, name, Baylor, Marcus. And it looks a lot like our actual CSV. So maybe this was a good example thing to use. So now we can actually pull this information back from this our phpMyAdmin. So phpMyAdmin, you can rewrite everything here pretty easily once you understand how it all works. All it's doing here is using SQL and just creating a UI. And this really is how a website works. You have a database, it stores information here, and then you write this type of SQL code to pull information from the database and present it. Just phpMyAdmin's interface looks like an admin area that's like really complicated. But once you get kind of comfortable with it, it's really pretty simple. And it has explain SQL. What is that going to do? Not anything that's just super helpful. So let's go ahead and get started with this. So you're going to have to excuse me. I haven't written raw PHP MySQL things in a long time, so please expect errors. So let's go back to localhost, and I'm going to create a file called people.php. And this is going to be a PHP file, which means we can start our PHP like this, and we're going to write some PHP in here. So if I can just remember all this. One thing to remember is you do not want to use, and net.tuts plus actually has this, PDO versus MySQLi, which should you use? This is going to be, perhaps I went about this the wrong way, but a lot of times you'll see people use like a connection variable and it's equal to MySQL connect and things like that. This is pretty much the old way, and you do not want to do that anymore. So when you see somebody use MySQL connect or MySQL select DB, and you can see I can't even type today. You don't want to use these procedural style functions. You want to go with an object-oriented route. I don't know why people think this is so bad. Like, I don't know. I just know you're not supposed to use it, so kind of stay away from it. So I'm going to use the MySQLi approach. PDO, you can read this article on here. It's really helpful, and it says you should use PDO, I think, at the very end. And it has some good points as to why you should use PDO. But we're going to go with the MySQLi route. And I actually have a video on it, which makes me feel bad because, or no, I don't know if bad is the right word, but the fact that I can't even remember all this. So, you're going to learn some PHP while we're at this. Okay, so this is going to be pretty easy, I think, how this works. So we're going to create a connection variable here. I'm just going to call it MySQL, and it's going to be equal to a new MySQL. Is that how that's defined? No, it's all underscore. Okay, so new MySQLi, and here it is. We're going to have localhost, my user, my password, my DB. Well, how does this work? What are we doing with this? Well, let me create a new tab real quick for localhost, phpMyAdmin. Okay, So where are the users? There's a thing that tells you the users somewhere in here. Maybe under privileges. Yes. So you have users in phpMyAdmin, and this is you can find these other places, but essentially it's showing that I have a root user, and his host is localhost, and his password is yes. The password's root. It's just root. So if you look back over at your MySQL, I think it's asking for a host. Well, we can look at these up here at the top. Our parameters in order from where you have to add them. We have host. This is going to go to localhost. So let's do that one real quick. Localhost. And then we're going to have to pass in a username. Well, my username's root. So let's do the root for the username, root for the password. And if you look at this, you're actually going to see somewhere. Oh, it's over here. This is just super wacky looking. I know. This is not the best way to do it, or to learn about PHP functions. And I can't think of one off the top of my head that would actually be usable. But let's just wipe one out real quick. The way that what it's doing is we have this function here. So let's create our own. We're going to have new user here. And new user is going to have a name that needs to be created. And we're going to have an age, for instance. And we're going to have their bio for biography. So this new user function that we would be creating, and if you don't know PHP, just kind of follow along. I'm really sorry if this is confusing. When it's confusing, post it in a comment for me to learn what I need to do to make it not so confusing. But try to just hang on for a while right now, because we're creating a function here, or we're creating a comment. This is an actual function. This is just kind of, we can say right here, a comment. Connect to the database. So these comments are just there so that you can read through the code and understand what's going on without having to read, okay, we're creating a variable here, we're creating a new object or instance of the MySQL class, we're passing in all this stuff. We can just read in a comment. So I'm writing this as a comment because it doesn't do anything. It's just there for to read. So we have this name, we have an age and a bio. But if we look at our table, and this isn't a great example, but our database for users, if we look at the structure of it, you can see we only have a name. So we could add 2 more fields at the end of this for name, age, and bio. I'm not going to do it right now. All I want to show you is that if we wanted to make these optional, so you only have to create a user with a name, the standard way of doing that is by putting them in square brackets, like so. So all this is saying is that you have 3 parameters that can be passed, but we're only focused on the name one, and if you want to pass an age you can, and if you want to pass a bio you can. So that means we could call it new user Baylor, new user Baylor and 18, or we could call it new user Baylor 18 and a web dev or something like that. So all 3 of these are valid and they're on the same function. So that's essentially what these are defining, is that these square brackets are saying these are optional. Now, why they're optional, if I can get back over here, like this one's optional, everything here's optional. I don't know why. Oh, that's why. Default host, I get. You don't have to worry about all that. Your PHP INI is just like your settings for the whole server by PHP. I don't know why you'd want to set it like this, but you could. I just don't think it's a great idea. If you want to set it up where you can set up all these username and roots and stuff, well, I can see why it's a good idea, but it's not the way I would do it. I would never do it this way because it's too complicated, I think. So this is going to create a new connection here. It's going to connect us to this database. Oh, and our database name is going to be users. And you can actually go through here and you can see DB name. Specify the default database to be used when performing queries. So you can see that's going to use users database here. So when we connect to this database, we have access to, if I go back to the users right here, we would have access to this people table. So let's go ahead and do this. I think I noticed that they actually gave us the do an error. Let's just put out both of these errors. Oh, let's do this one right here. This is what we want. So I'm throwing this in here, and I'm going to try to see if I can't reformat it. There we go. This is the official way. Object-oriented is what O stands for. Object-oriented way of doing it. It's broken until 5.3. So there's the reason why you'd want to use 5.3 or later in PHP. Okay, so let's just go back and load this file. If we go back to our browser, go back to index of, and reload, there's people.php. I can open this undefined variable MySQL I. Why? Oh, I didn't name it MySQL I. Okay, there we go. That's another thing. You notice how I got that error? You're going to want to set error. Oh, I don't know where you set this exactly. It's probably. Where am I right now? We're going to want to go to. Is it not in here? There's PHP 5.3.6 configuration php.ini error. It's going to be in here somewhere. There it is. I have mine set to all, which basically just means that, and like I said, when I'm doing stuff that you don't understand, just ask me, because I realize this is a little over your head, I'm sure, but all I'm just trying to show is I have all here. This is my server default. I don't even have to set this up, but if yours isn't, you're probably going to want to set it to error reporting to all, like that. Because whenever it's set like that, I can reload this page, everything's working. If I come in here and I call like echo out my name like that, you can see this name variable hasn't been created. We haven't done this setter right here. But that's what this is called, a setter, essentially. And you see an undefined variable name. So that's really helpful because you know when you're doing something wrong like this. Because if I did this like a strict, I think, you can see that's no longer there. So all means every error that comes out, you want to have that presented. But my server has that on by default, so I don't have to do this. So, like, it was really helpful right here because I never would have known that this error would have come up because I didn't know my variable names were the same. So let's go ahead and keep going. The last thing we need to do is say MySQL close. Okay, so this is going to close the connection, which means we don't have access to it anymore. So let's go ahead and actually create a query. So we're going to query the database, and I'm going to write an example query actually in phpMyAdmin. So I'm going to go to the SQL tab here, and I'm going to select star from the people table. And if I run this query, you can see that it's given us both the users that I've added inside of phpMyAdmin. So what this is doing is we're saying we want to select all the fields from our people table, and you can see it put us in our people table. And this is automatically added. I don't know why it did that, but it shouldn't have. So let's try to write another query real quick. And that's not what I want to use. So you can see it's just trying to be really helpful. So we want to only select the user's ID. So if I run this now you can see we're only getting the ID field. If we do this again, this is just getting kind of annoying. And we do name here and run this query again, you can see now we have just the person's name. So one thing that's been noted by a lot of people online, and I'm right there with them, you don't want to use the asterisk here. Now it's probably fine if you want to just get a list of field names or columns, but on a regular basis you just want to define which fields you want. It's really not that hard. You can see ID, name, and it's a lot easier on the database if you specify those. So I don't know if we can even see that, but you can see this one's 0.0004. If we do an asterisk and I get rid of this little thing that keeps popping up, if it's any different, it's even faster. This is not very difficult though. Like I have some that are like 20 fields long and things like that. You really only want to specify the fields that you need to use. So it's just kind of a thing to note. And we're actually going to define it where you specify it. We only want somebody's ID and their name. So let's go ahead and write this query out. So this is hopefully give you an introductory video, just enough to give you a taste of how you write select queries. So let's go ahead and actually write this in PHP to turn this into a real thing. So we're going to go in here and we're going to grab our users. So we're going to say users. Oh man, this is so bad. I don't write PHP very often. That's going to be my excuse for not knowing this right off my head. I think we're going to run with a query on this. So you can see we have a query. What this is going to do is you can see here's our optional field again, like I was showing you. You can see this is specifying this has to be a number. So by default it's set to this constant. Which is probably, I don't know what number it is by default. But we can see we have a string for a query, and the query is just like what we wrote here, because it's on one line. Right here, this is our query. So we know we're going to have to pass this in here, and I want to find out what it's going to return. So that's going to be at the very bottom right here. Return values, returns false on failure. For success on select, which is what we're going to be using because we're going to run a select query, it will return a MySQL object result. So that's going to tell us that when we want to run this query, we're expecting to get somewhere a result, and that might we're probably going to have to change over a little bit, but let's go ahead and actually try to get this. So we're going to go in here and we're going to say if our users or our people equal, and here we're going to run MySQL. This is our variable up here, and we're going to query our database. So query, and we're going to say select, and I actually wrap this in double quotes. Select, and here we're going to get their ID and their name. I don't know why I add spaces there, but I only do, I guess. From our people table. And you can actually wrap these each individually in those little backticks. And that's everything that we need there. So if we get these people, we could also just do it up here and just say if no people, if no people, or if people equals false, because like it said over here, it returns false on failure. So we want to make sure that we don't return false right here. And if we do, we're going to do something very similar to this line up here. Die, which is going to quit the application or quit the PHP script, and failed to get all people. And you could actually probably put out a real MySQL error like this. I don't know what it would be though. They're probably going to give it to us right down here somewhere. MySQL error right here. So we could do that. We could throw in here a colon space and put in MySQL error. There we go. So if we go back over to our page and reload, unexpected if. It's because I didn't add my semicolon at the end of this. So that's another thing. You're going to get used to this. When you're writing PHP, this unexpected TF. Well, I knew right away that I wrote this script out. I wrote an if statement, and I just knew that these are the last 3 lines of code that I've added, and I expected this needs the semicolon because I knew where I wrote that if. There are a lot of errors that you're going to get through, and when you get something like that, you can probably just copy this right here up to here and go and Google that, and you're going to find a whole slew of results. How to fix this right here, resolved. Somebody else had the same problem that we did. PHP Builder, I chose this one because this is a great forum. There are a lot of really smart people on here that are willing to help you. When I started out, you can probably find my Scooby-Dooby-Doo and stuff on here because I asked a whole bunch of questions. So it's saying, I need help with this, and they're going to say maybe like this, that didn't work. And somebody's going to end up fixing it for them. So you can kind of see this. This wasn't a great example because it was a lot more complicated. But let's go ahead and do this. So when you get an error like this, you can just copy up to here. You don't need the whole file name and line numbers. So let's go back and that's fixed, reload. Okay. So let's go ahead. We have our people. Let's look at these people. Let's look at this people object. So I have this thing. It's probably going to grab... Oh, no, that's on my other computer. People. And what this is doing, and I can actually even do this outside of PHP. It's really kind of a cool little function that I wrote. What it's doing is it's saying echo out a pre-tag. And if you're, let me just do it normally. Let's just say print r our people variable. So print r is just one of the functions in PHP that's great for debugging something. If you're not familiar, if you don't know what you're getting out inside of this variable, and you need to know what it is, just run a print r, and you can see that it's giving me a MySQL object. It's telling me that we have 2 fields that were found, which means that it found both of these fields, 1 and 2 here. And that's also an unbruised, I guess. And that's what we got. I don't think this is what we need, so we're probably going to change this over. But you can see this is how it worked. Now, the reason I added the pre-tags around this, so let's just do it over here. Echo pre-tag, echo closing pre-tag. If I reload this, now you can see it's formatted. And if you look at the view, if you view the source on this page, you can actually see that this was, they add line breaks inside of this. So the pre-tag is there because it makes it super easy to read this instead of it all being on one line. They break it into lines where it's really helpful. So I wrote that little snippet where if I type in debug and I can type in the people variable here, you can see it puts it all on one line like this. So this is actually, I don't know if I have a video on how that's working exactly or not, but why did it add a whole extra space right there? I don't know. But there it is again, same result, except this is on one line, so I can just delete it like that. There it goes. There we go. So that's just a little thing I wrote, I guess. I actually think, I don't know if you're using TextMate. There's actually an editor just like TextMate for Windows. It's like eText editor or something like that. Yeah. And this one actually, it's based on TextMate, the power of TextMate on Windows. And when you see this snippet that I've got over here, Baylor Arrays, bundle, debug, blah, blah, blah. Oh, right here for regular one. You can see I type in debug. It's when I type in a tab after it, it prints out this up here, and this is just the snippet or the syntax for writing these out. And it's scope selector, which means this only runs inside of source.php. So this is a source file. If I run Control-Shift-P, I think you can see there's source.php. Let me know. That's it. If I run it outside, if I go down to here, you can see this one's text.html. and this one actually wraps it in PHP tags. So if we come, that's how I was able to do this down here, because this one's scope is text with HTML. And debug, there it goes. So here's an observation, hopefully you'll note, is that you remember I did my print R like this, and I was able to print out the people variable. Well, you'll notice if I do debug here, it actually has a second parameter, true. And if you look at this, you can actually go to php.net and type in just about any function you can think of. So print R is ours that we're going to look at. And you can see that we have a Boolean value. That means it has to be true or false. You can use a 1 or a 0. I don't recommend doing that. It's really weird when I see people do it. But you're going to set it to true, and that's going to return the value, which means if I come in here and I set this to true, and I come back over to this page, you see it doesn't do anything. But if I say echo print R, now you can see it's echoing those results. So that's why I was able to do this pre-tag and came over here and did it again. There we go. So if I don't do it this way, you're going to see that it's either going to go before or after those tags. Actually, I don't know what it did exactly. I guess it returned. I don't know why it did that. These are not things that I usually do to play around with PHP. But there we go. So what do we want to focus on, though, since we've gone completely off subject, is our people here. So this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that gives me easy access to these people. So let's see how they actually do it in the demo. They run this. MySQL result. That's what I want to know about right here. This is what we want. So we want to fetch as an object right here. So let's see, we have a class name. Oh, I remember reading about that. And the example, we run this query and we loop through. We have, okay, so let's actually do this. So what do we get when we run this query? Well, we get an instance of our MySQL result class, which you can see right here, MySQL result. And this is saying, with these double colons, that we have this fetch object method on top of this class. So what I did is I went down to the examples to see how do they work, how do they use this fetch object thing. And they show us. We get a query here, or this is their actual query, and you can see this is how we're doing it. We're just setting it as a people. And they run MySQL query, and they just run it inside of an if. We're writing it, and then we're saying if it's false, then fail. And I'm not doing it this. I'm doing it this way because I'm going to come down below this and actually write it out in HTML. So we know from our people variable that we're getting where we can run fetch object on top of this. So what I'm going to do here is let's just come out of PHP. I'm going to write an HTML5 document. I'm going to say these are people page. And inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to put an h2 tag out, and we're going to say the people. Reload. You can see there's our tag. I'm going to write this out real quick as a style tag, and I'm going to say that my main font family will be Helvetica New or Helvetica, and then Arial or sans serif. And my font weight will be, if I can do this, 300. So if we run this, see now it looks pretty good. And let's just, while we're at it, set the background color to like F000. There we go. So it even matches Chrome a little bit. So here we go. Actually, let's do, I'm sorry, details and design and stuff just is really important to me. So HTML, set the background there. Give this a width of like 300 pixels, margin 40 pixels, 0. This is not right. This is supposed to be auto. And here I'm going to set margin to 0 and padding to 0. There we go. And this is going to have a background color of white. Okay, and we're going to set the padding on this to like 20 pixels. There we go. And let's got the H2 tag, margin, and padding will both be at 0. Okay, so that works. That's what I want, really. So we have something nice to look at. We'll also do this centered. There we go. So just a little bit of CSS, just because it's very important to me. So we have our, back to PHP, we have our people, and we know how to get the actual individual people from this. We can do fetch object. So we're going to come down in here, and we're going to write out an unordered list. Actually, this will be an ordered list. Actually, let's do a definition list. And what we want to do is we want to have a definition term for their ID, and the definition, I guess, will just be somebody's name, like Baylor. So that's how it's going to look. And this is also going to, nope, that's supposed to be 1. And then the second one's going to be their name, like this. There we go. Nope, not even thinking. Yeah. So that's how I kind of want it to work. It doesn't look right. But that's how we're going to do it. And we're going to have an individual definition list per person. So let's just put out here like an H4 tag of Baylor, like that. We're defining Baylor. This is just getting really bad. So let me just start over and write this out as an ordered list. And we're going to give out a list item with somebody's name or ID and then their name after it. So we have 1 Baylor. And I guess we don't need the name or the ID there. So we're going to have Baylor, and then the next one's going to be Marcus. There we go. So how do we actually write it out so it does this? Well, we can remove the HTML here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out my PHP here. And I'm going to do a while loop. Say while we have a person, while person equals our people fetch object, then we're going to echo out a list item, and inside of this list item we're going to have the person name, and then we're going to close our list item like that. So we run this, you can see the same result, which is just wacky looking, I'm sure. We can do up here, we can say order by ID descending. Now you can see it's reversed that, which means we could come in here and put a space. No, we don't need space there. And we can put out the person ID. And now you can see we can have the actual user ID. And I can actually wrap this in the strong tag. So now that's not very bold looking, but we put this into just regular unordered list. So there's their person's ID and then their name. So this is just the basics of working with phpMyAdmin and pulling stuff out. Hopefully it's made sense. Now I'm going to go back, and because I've written a lot of PHP in here and this while loop and stuff like that, it's really probably useful to go to YouTube, user Scooby Dooby Doo, and find my PHP from scratch videos. So if I can stop this, stop download. PHP from scratch right here, because I have videos that actually say what are functions and I'm really glad that ad popped up because that's something I want to talk about. What are if statements and what are arrays? What is the syntax? Things like that. These are some useful videos if you're brand new to PHP, because it's actually going to talk about what are all of these things. So the last thing I wanted to point out is that I really do recommend using HostGator as your first host. Now, I know if you look and you ask people questions, every single person has their own host that they recommend and why they're great. And it's really probably impossible for me to really have some useful experience that you're just going to be like, yep, that's why I'm switching over. The only reasons I really recommend using HostGator is because, one, their support's really nice. I can't tell you how many times I've had problems and they've helped me out within a day. For the most part, you can just go to HostGator.com and they have this live chat. I don't know if it's 24/7 or not, but I've been able to ask all the time, can I do this? Why isn't this working? Things like that. And the other thing is, they support PHP 5.3. 5.3 right here, and all you do is just go in here and you add this to an htaccess file. It's really easy and it allows you to use PHP 5.3. I can't tell you how many hosts I keep finding that don't allow you to write PHP 5.3, and once you get started with PHP and you start writing with PHP 5.3, you're not going to want to go back. You're going to want to stick. And here's super cool. They have PHP 5.3.10 or higher installed on our servers. Well, if you go to php.net and you look, PHP 5.10 was just released this month. They are on top of the ball with getting 5.3 installed. I'm not saying that not all hosts are like that, but in my experience, I really like HostGator. It's really easy to use. It's pretty cheap. I actually have the baby plan. It's really $10 a month. They have it at $6 a month because they have this 20% off. It's normally like $10 a month, but you can probably even get by with just the regular hatchling pan when you're getting started. Because if you look at these, everything's pretty much the same except you only have one domain. I'm allowed to have unlimited added under my domain. So if I'm really tempted to make a video on working with cPanel, I don't know how requested that is. That was something that also took me a long time to get used to. But before I go and make any more videos, I really do want some feedback as to what you guys think is helpful. So this video is an hour long. I had no intention of making an hour-long video, but hopefully you feel fairly confident and comfortable where that you can go and work with phpMyAdmin PHP if you weren't before. And like I said, I don't know what else y'all need to learn, what else is troubling y'all, but when you think of something, just ask me in a comment and I'll try to make a video on it. So thanks for watching this video, and goodbye.